In this video, we'll discuss what you should do to successfully import your data into R, and we'll especially focus on data that is stored in Excel. But don't worry, if your data is not in Excel, things will most likely be either very similar or actually much simpler. The object that R is using to store data is the data frame. A data frame is a rectangular structure with a set of columns and where all the columns have the same length. For the importation to go smoothly, your data should be in a similar rectangular format, like the data that you see here on the screen. We have one single rectangle of data, a first row containing all the column names, and right below it, we have all the values of these columns, and all the columns have the same length. And there aren't any cells that are merged. There are some missing values, which is totally fine. This is just part of the data. Now, if your data comes from another statistical software like SAS, SPSS data, you don't have to worry because this rectangular structure is used in all these softwares. But it's easy to have something different in spreadsheets like Excel. For example, here I have two rectangle of data on the same sheet. This is not good. Also, for the first rectangle of data, you see that the data only starts in the third row, and above we have some extra information. This is not a huge issue because we can ask R to read starting from the third row, but it's best to make your life easy if you can. So here what I would do, I would put the second rectangle of data in another sheet, and I would also put the extra information above the first rectangle in another sheet. Here is another example of badly formatted data. First, it's best to have a name to each of your columns. So here the first column doesn't have a name, so I would add a name like fields to this column. Second, your column names are not in one single row, they are on two rows, and that's not good. They should be on only one row. So one thing we could do is combine the two rows together by bringing the information of the first row into the second row. For example, instead of field, I would have field.montbazin. Then here, instead of longitude, I would have, let's make it a bit shorter, long.montbazin. And do the same for all the columns. And that would work fine, because then we can get rid of the information in the first row. But the best with such data where we have column names that are repeated 4 times, like in our data, is to have your data in long formats. That is, having only 5 columns, and instead of 33 rows, having 33 times 4 rows. The 4 columns would be field, longitude, latitude, altitude, and the last column would be the place, Montbazin, Condensec, etc. The last big issue in this data is the merging of the cells in the field column. You shouldn't have any cells that are merged. If I merge this cell, I now have the value field1 for the first row, but the information is missing for the other row. It shouldn't be. The information should be on every row. So here, what we should have is field1 for all the rows, and then field2 for all the rows, etc. My advice, really, is to avoid merging cells at all costs for any data that you might consider exploring with some software different from Excel. For your column names, as a general rule, it's good practice to use short but meaningful names and to avoid using accents, spaces, and other special characters. There are ways to handle these in R, but R will often transform or interpret them wrongly if you don't pay attention. So again, make your life easy. As an example, if you had a column whose name, like written in French, was température minimale with an accent on the E, a better name would be something like temp.min. That is making it short, getting rid of the space and the accent, but still keeping it meaningful. R is capable of importing data from Excel, but things may not always go as expected. So in general, once you have your data well structured in Excel, our advice is to save the data that you're interested in as a CSV file. A CSV file is a simple text file where the values are separated by a character, and by default, this character is a comma. Here you can see on the right of the screen what a CSV file looks like when you open it in the Notepad. On the left is the exact same data, but open with Excel. So let's go back to our good example of a well-formatted data in Excel, and let's save this sheet as a CSV file. It's very simple to do in Excel. You just need to click File, Save As, and choose where you want to save the file. It's good practice to create an RStudio project and place your data in your project folder. But here I'll just save my CSV file in some random folder so that you can see how you could import your data if it is in a random folder as well. So I'm gonna save my data in this folder called Awesome Study. I will call the CSV file Great Data. Why not? And below I will choose the format. This is where you need to choose CSV. There are multiple versions of CSV formats. They probably all work, but my recommendation would be just to stick with the simplest one, which is CSV, delimited. So you click that, save, and then you'll probably get a window that pops up. And this window just warns you that you are saving only one of the sheets of your Excel file. It's fine. This is what we want to do. We just want to save the data in this sheet. So I click OK. And that's it. If I go here, Awesome Study, my data is saved as a CSV file here. So now let's import our file, CSV file, into R. The first time you import some data, the simplest is to use the import dataset menu that is here on the top right. You see that when you click on it, there are several options. So that means that you could import files from SPSS, Excel, SAS data directly. We chose the CSV file rather than Excel file because it's safer. You have less surprise when you import the data. And to import the CSV file, what you need to do is just click the first option, from text base. This will open a window that asks you where your data is. My data is in Awesome Study, Great Data. And this will open a new window that gives you an idea of how the importation is going. It seems to go quite well. We see the first row is recognized as the column names, and the rest seems okay. If it wasn't okay, you can try to play with the parameter on the left to make it be better. And I'm happy with the name. Default name that RStudio is giving me. Great Data will be the name of my data frame. It's not too long. I'm happy with that, so I'll click Import. And you see on the right, now we have an object, Great Data, that is our data frame with 17 observations, 7 variables. I think that's fine. So this is where you should always check if things go okay in your importation on the right by looking at the number of observations, the number of variables. And RStudio opened the data sets just for you to look at. It seems fine. On the console, you see that R wrote the command that was executed when you imported the dataset. This command is this one. And you should always copy it and paste it in your script, because the idea is you use the import dataset menu the first time, and then you just copy it, and now you have the command. You can just use the command right away without going to the menu. So that's it. Now we have our data that is imported.